That's a mirror. That's fun. Hi everybody, we are here for round one of your top cut. So this is technically your top 8. And now as I'm looking at this team sheets, I'm realizing that they are a mirror match, and that's totally fine. Thank you again for spending your Sunday, more importantly Father's Day, with us. Whenever you can, we do really appreciate all of your views, and you guys are all troopers, so super appreciate that for all of this. As a reminder, this is technically our last CP event of the season, so whoever wins this will win the last of the Southern California, or at least for this area of the CP. So looking forward to seeing that, because you will see a lot of familiar names in top 8, and one of them right now is Brok versus Shane Gaffney. So again, just letting you all know, it is technically, I think, a new balance mirror, so this will be fun for everyone.
I mean, it's technically a mirror until you find out some of these movesets, because we've seen Aaron on a completely different Iron Hands than like the typical Assault Vest variants, which is really interesting to point out, because in the mirror match, it just depends on how Pokemon are just trained. Yeah,
and so like that's the nice thing about like teams that are super like popular in the meta, right? Like despite the fact that you could have the same 6, the way that you play and the way that you train your Pokemon can be completely different, which brings into an entirely new game. And so the nice thing about something just like having open teams is that, yeah, you can look at the movesets, and sometimes that informs you exactly how these Pokemon are going to pair up against each other. So for both sides, we're looking at here, we're going to see a Chi-Yu, we're going to see a Gyarados, a Mamungus, Iron Hands, a Fluttermane, and a Tinglu. So really, I think at the end of the day, it's sort of like an Intimidate battle, and it's sort of like who can make sure that any sort of like recovery that they have can be stopped first.
I'm looking at both these teams and I'm wondering which Pokemon from both sides can do the most neutral damage, and so far I believe that answer is going to be that Fluttermane, but each Tinglu and their Vessel of Ruin can absolutely make that neutral damage be like laughable.
Yeah, and like the fun thing too is that if we're looking at Aaron's Gyarados, right, it actually does have Helping Hand as one of its moves instead. So it does have Waterfall, Thunderwave, Taunt, and Helping Hand, so no protects here for that Gyarados, right? And so I think being able to Intimidate Cycle and then being able to like up the damage that you might get because of other Intimidates and because of any sort of like maybe getting some burns from like a potential like Heat Wave or like Flight Burst, stuff like that, like you're really looking at sort of I think also like the Tinglus, right? One Tinglu has Assault Vest, the other has leftovers, and sometimes the leftovers extra HP that you get at the end of every turn is also just a really big deal to have, right? Because at the end of the day, some of that extra HP can make all the difference.
A lot of it, I mean, we've seen the HP make a lot of difference before throughout this entire tournament, and heading into this first quarterfinal matchup, we're gonna see how each of these teams are trained up to be, and we're gonna see Fluttermane Iron Hands for Shane to start, and Aaron with Iron Hands and Gyarados.
Yeah, so the Gyarados' Intimidate is actually going to be really nice here on that Iron Hands on Shane's side. Fluttermane just says like, okay, that's cool, I don't use attack, like regular attack, but the Photosynthesis is going to be able to boost up that special attack even more. So hey, any of those any of like that Shadow Ball, those Moonblast, gonna hurt even more. And actually looking at Shane's Fluttermane, it has the staying power and the staying capability because of the fact that it is running a substitute set.
It is pretty free to go for the substitute here if Aaron plays this super passively, which I think might happen. So what better time to go for a substitute than right now, because Shane could definitely take advantage of that. That Gyarados does not go for Waterfall.
Yeah, I think part of the issue about sometimes trying to figure out when to run substitute, right, is if you run the substitute and you take like that HP like hit to yourself, like when is it really ever the right time? Because what if you lose it immediately? But Gyarados is leaving the field here to be replaced by Amoonguss. So Amoonguss, one of those Pokemon that's just, you have to figure out how to deal with it because it can be a pain if it's not. But the Iron Hands on Aaron's side is going to be going for that Detect here, as the fake out from Shane's Iron Hand goes into that protected spot. So like you said, if this is Fluttermane good, yep, we went first. That is a free substitute for that Fluttermane, unpunished completely here. I mean, sure, the Amoonguss is also coming in for free here, but that Fluttermane now is able to do a lot of damage with the fact that it has that boosted special attack from that booster energy, and is now behind the substitute.
Yeah, I also wanted to point out that fake out in the Iron Hands was actually pretty smart, because again, the only thing you're really worried about if you're at Fluttermane is probably more so, you're not as worried about Earthquake, you're more worried about something like for that Iron Hands, like that Thunder Punch, because you know Fluttermanes are not physically bulky, but the way I'm looking at both these teams, I feel like Iron Hands is much bigger threat than Gyarados is.
Yeah, I also like the Gyarados is more of a support Pokemon in terms of getting the Intimidates down here. So actually, Iron Hands on Shane's side is going to be switched out on this turn. Was able to burn that Fake Out from earlier, and actually going to have his own Amoonguss coming out here. And now we're actually going to see a Terastallization from Aaron. It was going to be that Iron Hands with that Fire Terastallization. So you know, at least able to just make sure that those Drain Punches so at least like getting that Fire Terastallization is just a little bit nicer for him here in terms of any sort of resistances. Shadow Ball from that Flutter Mane from behind the substitute is going to go down into that Amoonguss spot, it looks like, and does a lot of damage. Again, this is a special attack boosted from that booster energy, and the special defense drop here as well. But Thunder Punch from the Iron Hands into that Flutter Mane substitute gets the critical hit, and is going to be able to at least get some damage to that substitute and break that substitute on this turn.
I mean, that was probably an easy break to substitute. I got another free turn here, and that's a good double up. If you know that Thunder Punch is going to break the substitute, that's a free Spore.
Yeah, and so now the Flutter Mane is going to be put to sleep and did not have to take a necessary sleep turn this turn, so is going to have to take one next turn.
And that's the thing, because now Flutter Mane has to take this guaranteed turn and sleep. This Amoonguss, let me have a look here. Pollen Puff may get the Flutter Mane, the Amoonguss down to around the red health because of the special defense drop. Maybe a surprise knockout if it's lucky. But at the same time, maybe Aaron's Amoonguss has to switch out just to get, first of all, for HP recovery. Second of all, maybe just to make sure it's still in a good spot.
Yeah, and like this Flutter Mane is in a really awkward position, right? Because you want to try to force to make sure that you have that necessary sleep turn that you have to take, right? And then that's leaving you kind of open to any sort of damage. But actually, Shane's gonna withdraw that Flutter Mane, which actually I think Aaron really wanted to happen because we saw him click into that spot twice. Once with a Spore, it's gonna be that Iron Hands coming back out onto that field. So Iron Hands from Aaron's side going to be using that Thunder Punch. Not gonna do a lot of damage here, but more importantly, call that switch out is able to put another Pokemon to sleep. So now that Iron Hands on Shane's side is going to be asleep as well once it comes in. And sure, Amoonguss is able to go for a clear smog into the Iron Hands on Aaron's side, but more importantly, Aaron definitely has the upper hand here now because he's managed to put two Pokemon to sleep, including that Iron Hands that just switched in.
That's the unfortunate thing right now for Shane, because you bet you wanted to make sure that Pokemon you brought in would not take that Spore, but Aaron reading that perfectly, you know, he's like, okay, if you stay in here for your Flutter Mane, it's likely going down to the red health or maybe you can get yourself KO. If it doesn't switch, whatever comes in is going to go immediately to sleep.
Yeah, and I think now Shane's really in a rough spot here, right? Two of his Pokemon are asleep. The Amoonguss isn't really doing much, and so now this Iron Hands on Shane's side is taking that necessary sleep turn. A Drain Punch from the Iron Hands on Aaron's side is at least able to get some damage down into it, slowly chipping away at its health as it recovers its own thanks to that secondary effect of Drain Punch. And Amoonguss is going to return with a cleared smog, gets that Iron Hands down to half health with critical hit, and now Shane's own Amoonguss is at least saying, hey, even though you're asleep, I'll heal you up a little bit more. Here is going to get that Pollen Puff down into the Iron Hands, gets it back up to almost full. So it almost feels like that turn maybe possibly didn't even happen, but more importantly, like, both of these Iron Hands are still full health, and at least now Shane's Iron Hands has a chance of waking up.
I'm a bit surprised that Shane's not going for the Pollen Puff on the Amoonguss, especially with that special defense drop that I got from the Shadow Ball earlier. Maybe I am just underestimating how much damage Pollen Puff's able to do in the first place, but I don't know, a little hard to know, especially if this Iron Hands for Aaron gets off the Swords Dance that it just clicked.
Yeah, and like once you have an Iron Hands that's kind of set up with Swords Dance, then you're in a really, really rough spot. We are going to see a Terastallization here from Shane's side. Is going to be that Iron Hands as well. It is actually going to be a Grass Terastallization, so we've got one Fire and one Grass for the Terastallization on both of these Iron Hands. So a little bit of a different typing here, as Swords Dance from Aaron's Iron Hands is able to happen here. Is going to get a +2 to its attack, so those Drain Punches are going to be even more terrifying. Shane's Iron Hands, unfortunately, still asleep for this turn, as Amoonguss actually goes for the Spore because it knows it does have the chance to wake up here and didn't want to risk that. But Amoonguss now from Shane's side going for the Clear Smog into the Iron Hands on Aaron's.
Yeah, that Swords Dance now mitigated. Again, oh my god. I mean, this Iron Hand's taking 2 turns of sleep, so good. I think that was good anticipation for Aaron to go ahead and go for the Spore on the slot in case it did get the 1-turn wake up, but unfortunately now this Terastallization into the Grass type, that's no longer an option, except Clear Smog's not super effective.
Yeah, and I think now going for another Swords Dance, there you are. You're at +4 now with this Iron Hands and this sorry, +3.
Two.
So 2? No, it went for Iron Hands.
It clears smog.
Yeah. And so you're kind of still in a rough spot, right? Like if you can get rid of this Amoonguss, then sure you don't have to worry as much. But now you're just playing this game of like, okay, cool. We're just gonna have the same turns over and over again, right?
Yeah, and Iron Hands, sadly, they take another turn to sleep, so at the very least, Shane's Iron Hands will wake up this turn. But I think we're now in a position where Aaron is just not getting that clear smog setup because every time he's tried to get the sword stance up, he's gotten clear smog, it's went back to neutral every time. And I'm still shocked that this Amoonguss is still in the field with that -1 special defense drop. I don't know, like, am I really just over giving Amoonguss too much credit?
And so here we are gonna have that Drain Punch go into the Iron Hands for Shane's side. So Iron Hands, they're just giving each other high fives at this point because they keep Drain Punching. But Iron Hands waking up finally on Shane's side is going for the Heavy Slam actually onto that Amoonguss. Not able to pick up the knockout here, but it's gonna take damage from that Rocky Helmet, so no berry to chow down on. As Amoonguss on Aaron's side is able to go for a Pollen Puff onto Shane's Amoonguss.
There we go.
And we're exchanging Pollen Puffs. So now the Amoonguss is gonna get knocked out on Aaron's side. No more sport potential for anything that Shane has in the back, even though that Fluttermane is still already asleep.
And that Fluttermane still is yet sticking her asleep, as for those of you paying attention at home. We see Chi-Yu come in from Aaron, and now that it's facing out of the grass type Iron Hands, and we do know he's already used his terrestrialization, so Heat Wave is going to hit everything at least for neutral or super effective.
Yeah, this Chi-Yu is gonna have a great time out on the field. I said, oh, you wanted to terrestrialize? Okay, well, now I'm here to say that was probably a rough idea because all these fire type moves are gonna be great because I have spread moves. I don't have to worry about anything like Rage Powder here. And Shane's saying, okay, you know, I don't like that idea, so I will switch out this Iron Hands on this turn. We're gonna see the Fluttermane come into play. It is gonna have to take some damage. Again, did not take that necessary sleep turn yet, but actually a double switch in here from Shane, so we're finally gonna see that last Pokemon that had, and it's actually gonna be the Tinglu, and that Tinglu is still gonna have to take a fire type move on the switch in, but the Amoonguss at least lives to see another day and has the regenerator ability to at least get back some of the HP. And the Thunder Punch into what was that Amoonguss that Tinglu said, I don't feel anything.
Yeah, Drain Punch would have been a little bit of a better read there, as we do see the leftovers gonna go ahead and give Tinglu a bit of recovery. And actually, that Heat Wave did a little less damage than I thought, but that's probably more so thanks to the Vessel of Ruin mitigating the Beads of Ruin, even though this Chi-Yu is choice specs. And the thing becomes now, can Fluttermane even survive? Because if it doesn't, then, well, you pretty much used it to maybe get another setup position with this Iron Hands and the Amoonguss in the back that has now recovered a bit more HP back, even though you know the true threat is that Chi-Yu, which thankfully cannot terrestrialize thanks to the Iron Hands.
Yeah, and I like that Aaron's actually finally taking this spot to go ahead and try to finally set up a Swords Dance and is saying, hey, you know what? There's no Amoonguss to clear smug me, so I think I'm kind of safe because your Fluttermane has to stay asleep for this turn. Gyarados is going to be able to get Intimidate now, and we're in a spot where, like, you know, it's just like, okay, I'm free to go for this +2 attack right now.
There's the mandatory turn to sleep for Fluttermane. Can't do anything about that. What did each team do? So Aaron gonna go ahead and get the Swords Dance off. Hopefully he doesn't get clear smog this time. He goes up to +2 for maybe the third time this battle. And there's a Stopping Tantrum going into the Iron Hands, doing a decent amount of damage.
Yeah, it has been intimidated like because of that Gyarados. So it is still gonna get back some of that HP. And Fluttermane definitely needs to wake up because it needs to be able to get some damage down onto these other Pokemon, or else it's gonna be in a lot of trouble.
I mean, yeah, we've seen Winter and Wake-ups before. I'm just wondering if, I mean, then again, there's a Vessel of Ruin for Shane that's actually, okay, we're going to see Protect. It doesn't want to take a Waterfall or a Drain Punch, especially that +2 boost on the Iron Hands now finally sticking. It wakes up, it opens its eyes. What's it going to do? It's going to set up a substitute. Barely has enough HP to do so, but is that a Waterfall coming its way?
That's actually a really interesting choice on the substitute there, because the Waterfall from the Gyarados is going to go into that Fluttermane spot. It's going to hit into that substitute instead, and it's going to break that substitute, just saying, okay, cool, well, you didn't take the attack, but your substitute did. And Drain Punch from the Iron Hands is going to go into that Ting spot, which did protect. So I think what's really interesting here is that that's a nice sort of way to give yourself a chance to figure out where things are going in terms of damages, right? I mean, you still technically have access to protect, so you could protect on that turn too with the Fluttermane, right? Because I think at the end of the day, you're trying to figure out what does your opponent here because something's gonna go down this turn.
Something's going to go down unless that's a swap out for Tinglu to Amoonguss, which I think might be a bit obvious to do here as we do see the Tinglu come out, switch out.
Hey, at least you don't have to worry about the Drain Punch doing that much more. I mean, you are still at +2. But this Amoonguss is back at full health thanks to Regenerator.
Moonblast goes into the Gyarados, no longer hindered by that Vessel of Ruin. Not going to do under 50, it's just going to do under 50% health right there as the Waterfall finishes off this Flutter Mane and removes it from the battle for game 1. Drain Punch goes into the Amoonguss. Oh my goodness, that's a lot more damage than I was thinking it was going to do, even though it is at +2.
Yeah, that Swords Dance is really nice, and now Aaron is like trying to like get as much out of that as before the Amoonguss says, hey, you know the Sword Dance that you enjoyed? Yeah, we're going to get rid of them again.
And here we go, Iron Hands once again coming out from Shane. This grass type Iron Hands gonna go ahead and wall Gyarados from doing anything meaningful with that Waterfall, even though it may stop Waterfall, it's not gonna stop Thunder Wave now that it's no longer an electric type.
Yeah, and actually looking at Shane's Iron Hands, it actually has access to Wild Charge instead of Thunder Punch, so you could do a lot of damage to Gyarados, and you just sort of have to respect that, right? But Iron Hands is going for the fake out onto Aaron's Iron Hands here, gonna stop it for this turn. Gyarados actually going for the Thunder Wave into the Amoonguss spot instead. Gonna make sure that things like the Clear Smog, the Rage Powders, all of that just isn't going to be happening here. But Amoonguss says, you know what? You can try to paralyze me. It's not going to work, so I'm going to put you to sleep instead. Yeah,
Gyarados falling asleep here. Now this is what happens when you basically when you see these typical balance matches. It's like both these players currently are neutral, and both are trying to find their way to the advantage state. And so far, it looks like Shane's back in the advantage state, especially with that Grass Translation in his favor.
Yeah, what's really nice too is that like this Amoonguss, even though it was paralyzed, right, was able to at least get the Spore down into a Pokemon, and like you are going to at least now turn the tables on Aaron where you're like, you put me to sleep, now it's my turn to do that to you. And I think as long as you're able to just keep the momentum a little bit in your favor, even just the tiniest, then you're okay. So Gyarados is going to take that turn of sleep here, is going to be forced to go ahead and do that as the
wow,
yeah, Aaron's Iron Hands is just missing the knockout on Shane's Iron Hands. Is able to hold on, and now is going to get back some of the HP, not quite as much because it's not as set up as Aaron's own Iron Hands was, so it was able to get back more HP because of it. But Clear Smog says, all right, now we're on even footing, is going to get rid of all of those +2s from the Swords Dance.
This Iron Hand is pretty much in trouble now from Aaron's, and the thing becomes now, does his Iron Hands still stay on the field and go for another Drain Punch, or does it try to sacrifice itself with that Wild Charge, try to knock out this Gyarados before it does any more damage? Because we do see a Tinglu in the back, and it doesn't appreciate taking any waterfalls, but it's just becoming tough for Shane to come back because the Flutter Mane did go down earlier, so his last bit of offense just goes down to this Tinglu.
Yeah, and I think you don't really want to risk the Gyarados getting like that turn 1 wake up, because like we saw with Shane's own Pokemon, it was possible for it to wake up on turn 1. Oh no! Amoonguss unable to go for the Rage Powder because of that paralysis, so that Gyarados before it went to sleep was able to put in some work. But Gyarados stays asleep on this turn, is going to make sure that like nothing else happens. But we did see that Aaron's Iron has consistently been faster than Shane, so Shane is going to be the first to lose a second Pokemon here, and that's actually going to be a pretty big deal for him because that Tinglu in the back is going to have to put in a lot more work, especially because Amoonguss has to worry about the paralysis now.
Yeah, and down goes the Translation for Shane, and down goes the Iron Hands for him, and down to Tinglu, and
I mean, hey, you know what? If you still have Pokemon on the field and you have a way to win, again, a 0%, like if your chance of winning is not 0%, then you take that, right? So I think here now, when you're looking at that Tinglu for Shane, you can at least try to get some, yeah, so another sleep turn here for the Gyarados, but you can at least try to get the Ruinations into there, maybe like trying to get rid of Iron Hands, but that is just so much damage. Yeah, the critical hit there, like really mattering, because the Iron Hands gets back so much HP, and that Tinglu loses so much of it as it does go for the Stomping Tantrum into the Iron Hand spot, does a lot of damage back, but the Pollen Puff, at least from Shane, is able to heal up that HP that Tinglu had just lost, but that critical hit really putting a wrench, I think, in Shane's plans.
And also, I think another thing that's going to put Shane's plans down below like his win percentage is going to be a wake up for Gyarados, as it's going to be guaranteed this turn, and Taunt looks very telegraphed right now.
It's going to be kind of just a rough spot for Shane. I mean, sure, you could try your best to sort of maybe Rage Powder here and at least stop that for like one turn and give your Tinglu a chance. But it's going to be a little bit tougher now, right? Like since you weren't able to knock out one of the Pokemon last turn, both Amoonguss and Tinglu have a rougher time now against both of this Iron Hands and that Gyarados. Again, that critical hit with that Drain Punch really helping out Aaron in the long run here because that was a lot more HP to like heal up. But Tinglu actually going for a Protect on this turn says, hey, I don't want to have to really deal with getting attacked, as Gyarados is waking up on this turn, is going to go for the taunt into the Amoonguss, and the Amoonguss is like, well, all you can really do is click Clear Smog and Pollen Puff at this point. And Iron Hands going for the Drain Punch into that protecting loose spot is gonna not get any HP back. It's been stealing so much HP all game long. And now Amoonguss is shut down, can't use Spore.
So it's down to either healing roll or trying to clear smog whatever it can, which at least the clear smog is not hurting anything because nothing got boosted or nothing got intimidated for Shane. But yeah, the writing's on the wall. He doesn't see a way back. Yeah,
for Shane, I think at that point, right, if you're unable to pick up to match the knockouts that your opponent is getting on you, then you're in a worse off position in that moment. And I think part of that is that Iron Hands on Aaron's side, even with the clear smog negating all of those sword stance boosts, you still have to wonder, how do you stop that Iron Hands from like running amok, right? Because the turn that you double switch, that means, oh, Aaron sees an opportunity to go, okay, hey, I have at least one turn where these sword stances actually matter and that damage actually matters.
Yeah, and again, we're going out to all those clear smogs that kept going to Aaron's Iron Hands from Shane's Amoonguss. The problem became just like that double switch turn where that Amoonguss was no longer able to start clear smog when Iron Hands went for that sword stance. It's like the turn that it finally got that sword stance off and got it to stick, it did damage everywhere. And then by the time Amoonguss removed it, I still think that damage was done and that Iron Hands just became too much of a problem for Shane and just responded way too late.
Yeah, the Iron Hands is really definitely the thing that you have to focus here if you're Shane, right? I think that the turn that he also substituted with that Fluttermane that second time, you know that you're like fastest, you should be at least able to get some damage down to the other Pokemon, because I think either way you're going to lose that that substitute and you're going to lose that Fluttermane, so you should at least try to get some damage out of it before that happens. And I think that was another part where like the Fluttermane wasn't able to put in as much work as I think it possibly could have.
Yeah, I wonder if there's gonna be any switch ups from both these trainers. As I mean, I'm not sure if this needs to be said, but safety goggles, preventing the sleep, preventing the rage pattern, including Terrifier to prevent burns. This allows Iron Hands to be the monster that it can be, and yeah, Shane's gonna switch it up and go Amoonguss Iron Hands, and Aaron gonna stick to the Gyarados Iron Hands lead from game 1.
Yeah, I think right now the Amoonguss is sort of the linchpin for a lot of them, right? Because you have the ability for the side Pollen Puff healing, you have the ability for the spores, and that's really just sort of a huge thing. And so if you're not respecting any sort of like items that you have to like negate that, then you're kind of in a lot of trouble. But I do appreciate that Shane is at least making this Amoonguss put a little bit more pressure, right? The Amoonguss is always just sort of a thorn in people's side, despite the fact that it's basically a fungus.
It's been very defensive for so many years, and whenever it's been in a format, you have to at least know to respect it because of its defensive capabilities and annoyance factor with that Spore. We do see Amoonguss come in for Aaron's Gyarados, so if it went for the Spore that way, it's going to get negated to the Grass type, but as we see the Sword Stance come up from Aaron's Iron Hands, I think Shane's might be looking for a Volt Switch, but instead of a Wild Charge into an Amoonguss, it's going to take a bit of recoil damage on his own Wild Charge, but also by the Rocky Helmet.
Yeah, actually, Shane's Iron Hands might have taken more from that damage than the Amoonguss did. Amoonguss going for the Spore into what was that Gyarados, because Iron Hands already says, I don't see that because I have safety goggles on. Remember, kids, before you go into the lab, make sure you have your safety goggles on for stuff like this. But yeah, I think Shane is now in like a little bit of a worse off position. We do see basically like a true mirror here in this moment, but I think Shane is in a little bit more trouble than Aaron is with that.
Yeah, and that's a forced terrestrialization from Shane, and yeah, you really don't want to get spored here by this Amoonguss here from Aaron, but the difference between these Iron Hands is becoming really apparent because the Sword Stance from Aaron's Iron Hands is really becoming a problem for Shane, as he does detect to make sure that Clear Smog does not stick.
Yeah, and so the Iron Hands actually on Shane's side going for the Drain Punch into Aaron's own Iron Hands, which is hiding behind a Protect on this turn, as Amoonguss is trying to go for a Spore again, was trying to forgetting maybe expecting like no terrestrialization this turn, but that Grass terrestrialization making sure that now the Iron Hands on Shane's side also can't get put to sleep.
Yeah, we did see the Clear Smog go into the Iron Hands slot, so the threat now becomes if that Clear Smog sticks, how much damage are we really limited to? Because we saw how much plus 2 Drain Punch did to that Amoonguss. Let's see how much it does to the Iron Hands. That's a lot of damage, and yeah, that is a lot. And Iron Hands will get some of that recovery back, but it really wishes it had Swords Dance right now.
Yeah, it wishes it had that same much sort of damage output and recovery because it's slowly inching itself back up to the green, but not by much. And Pollen Puff from Amoonguss on Aaron's side is going to even do more damage. That gets it down into the red, but Clear Smog from Shane's Amoonguss is finally going to be able to stop all those Swords Dance boosts. But it might just be a little bit too late because we have seen that Aaron's Iron Hands is faster than Shane's, and Shane's can't protect because it's currently wearing an Assault Vest. So it's going to be unable to like really protect in the face of all of this, and if you switch out, then that's a free score for Aaron's Amoonguss.
Yeah, we did see Aaron lock in that double slot into that Iron Hands to predict a swap out, and that does end up happen. The swap out into the Flutter Mane is not going to appreciate. If it was Drain Punch, then you don't get the damage off it. You just get a score.
I think you're just sort of covering all your bases here as much as you can, right? So the Flutter Mane's booster energy is going to activate, get that extra special attack that we saw was so good for that Moonblast, but Drain Punch not going to connect here with that Flutter Mane because of its typing, but the Amoonguss is able to get the spore down. So you're really covering all your bases here for Aaron. There's very little punishment that you have in there because Shane's own Amoonguss is unable to just put the Iron Hands to sleep, and so sure you get the Pollen Puff into there, but honestly, like I think Shane was sort of in a tough spot there, right? You either let the Iron Hands go down on that turn, or you expect the switch out, and if you do, then something goes to sleep.
Yeah, and Thunder Punch seems really safe right now, and no threat for Rage Powder thanks to the safety goggles protecting it. Flutter Mane going to take his first turn of sleep that it has to take. I think this has to be a Clear Smog maybe that comes out. Let's see how much this Thunder Punch does. That's
so
a lot.
much.
That's a lot of damage. As a Clear Smog coming its way, not going to do a lot of damage because of that high special defense that Flutter Mane thankfully has. And each trainer trades a Clear Smog.
Yeah, and I wonder if like this was the turn that Shane should have gone for that Pollen Puff into that Flutter Mane, right? Because like getting the attack down, it's still kind of like a rough thing to sort of call, because if you don't, then like that's a free Swords Dance hit, so you're still gonna get like knocked out here. But now this Flutter Mane is going to get knocked out most likely no matter what, unless the Shane decides to switch it out. But then that means whatever's coming in is also taking a lot of damage.
But also, this Flutter Mane would have loved to use something like that Moonblast into the Iron Hands, because it doesn't have the Assault Vest, so it would be taking a lot of damage. But Aaron did lock into Terra Fire, as we're going to see it right now.
Yeah, so finally the other Iron Hands terrestrializing. We saw the grass on Shane's, and now we're going to see the fire for Aaron. He said, hey, I don't want to have to worry about like any sort of like Moonblast shenanigans and stuff like that, so we are going to terrestrialize here, as Flutter Mane actually stays asleep on this turn. No turn one wake up. Unfortunately, it is going to have to take some more damage. This Thunder Punch is going to pick up the knockout here on that Flutter Mane, putting this Flutter Mane out for the rest of the game. Amoonguss going for the Pollen Puff on Aaron's side is going to be able to heal up some damage from the Iron Hands. This Iron Hands, I think, has regained way more HP than like I think I've ever seen before, as the Pollen Puff from Shane's Amoonguss fails to find a target, and he's that Flutter Mane did get knocked out.
Iron Hands proving that like it's been one of the best Pokemon since its introduction in Regulation B Series 2, whatever you want to call it. I mean, I'm pretty sure people are still divided about that.
And so I think the crazy thing too is that Iron Hands has had sort of like a different sort of evolution, right? It used to be very supportive, and now it's a little bit more aggressive as a Pokemon here. We know that Aaron's Iron Hands is faster than Shane's. And sure, Shane can't even click Rage Powder here because again, the safety goggles kind of stops that, and like Aaron's Iron Hands will ignore all of that going on. So I think this is a really just kind of tough spot for Shane to be in, right? And whatever he does, there's an answer for it. So he will go for the fake out into the Amoonguss on Aaron's side. He's gonna get hurt by the Rocky Helmet and is gonna get knocked out. So I guess it's one of those like, you know what, I will go out on my own terms here.
Probably a better option there, because you do want to take at least as much minimal damage as possible, but Amoonguss is going to take a little bit of damage unnecessarily. I mean, unless that fake out was actually planned. But Pollen Puff, once again, failing to find an Iron Hands that just fainted by its own fake out.
Yeah, I mean, hey, you could just say, you know what, I'm going to go down on my terms and not yours. And so this Ting-Lu is going to come in as the last Pokemon on Shane's side. And Aaron's still sitting at a healthy 4 Pokemon, really. Like, it's looking pretty bad because, yeah, there's not that much punishment for Swords Dance here. I mean, sure, the Amoonguss could Clear Smog it, but Aaron's is actually going to go for a Rage Powder. Is free to do so and distract that Ting-Lu to itself.
Yeah, there's the Swords Dance. Doesn't want to. I mean, that Rage Powder is going to come in very much in handy thanks to that Swords Dance setup from the Iron Hands. Yeah, go ahead and redirect that Ruination to make sure it's nowhere near range of something like the Stomping Tantrum. But Pollen Puff does cover the option in case he did go for a straight up Drain Punch.
Yeah, I think you're still in a really rough spot here, right? Because now this Iron Hands is at +2. I'm sure you can try to clear Smog it, but then at that point your Tinglu is still within range of being knocked out by basically anything when it gets looked at. And so I think if you can at least get rid of like maybe that Amoonguss, then you have this game sort of locked down.
And that has to be the read that Shane has to go for, because Aaron locked in Detect on the Iron Hand is going to make sure it doesn't take any damage from Stomping Tantrum, from Ruination, or even something like that Clear Smog from Shane's Amoonguss. Well, these Amoonguss have done everything right. It's just like the mirror match really has come down to how these Iron Hands are trained, and so far Aaron's had the better Iron Hands out of the two.
Yeah, so the Detect here is going to make sure that it doesn't get hit, but Heavy Slam from Tinglu still not enough to actually pick up the knockout on the Amoonguss. It's going to take damage from the Rocky Helmet for its troubles, and now we've got a Pollen Puff from one Amoonguss into the other, but Amoonguss on Shane's side is going to at least heal up the Tinglu a little bit, so, you know, still sort of in the game. I mean, Amoonguss Tinglu might have a rough time, like 2v4 Aaron's team, but I guess they're still not out of it.
No, but Gyarados coming in, gonna go maybe do an Intimidate into the Tinglu for Shane, as we do see it happen for the Amoonguss. Gonna get some HP recovery back. Doesn't want to at least go down to the Heavy Slam or a Pollen Puff, which I thought would actually come out into the Amoonguss the last turn, but you know, you don't want to take as much damage as you can, knowing you're staring down a +2 Drain Punch Iron Hands, but Tinglu protects nonetheless.
Yeah, so Tinglu is going to try to survive for just at least another turn as Iron Hands actually goes for the Drain Punch into that protected spot. That Tinglu, you know, less damage output now because of that -1 from the Intimidate, but Amoonguss able to land a Clear Smog, so those +2 Sword Dance is not going to be there anymore, but still, you are kind of in a really rough spot because now this Gyarados is free to taunt that Amoonguss, like we're seeing it click into, and just leaving this this Iron Hands to just really go for whatever it really wants at this point.
And that's the thing, because now that this taunt comes out, I mean, if Shane knows about this, he probably goes for another Clear Smog or a Pollen Puff, but if he doesn't, then yeah, this Swords Dance will stick. Let's just see if Shane actually gets the taunt read right.
Yeah, Iron Hand says, you know, I'm going to keep Swords Dancing in front of you until you force me to not be able to do it anymore. Ruination from Tinglu is able to connect into the Iron Hands, finally gets it down below half HP, but Pollen Puff from Shane going to go into the Tinglu instead and is unable to punish the Swords Dance setup.
I do understand that read though, because if the Iron Hands went for the Drain Punch into the Tinglu, and you at least get a lot of recovery back, in order to at least combat the Drain Punch that's incoming. But that's the punish. If you don't Clear Smog and instead go for the heal, which would not work, as now Tinglu forced to protect. I wonder if everything goes into this Amoonguss this turn, as we do see Thunder Wave go into the Amoonguss. Let's see if the luck of the draw goes Shane's way.
Yeah, and it's like at least this Amoonguss is like being put a stop to, right? Its taunt is going to be paralyzed. Iron Hand's Drain Punch goes into that Tinglu spot. Really the problem here now that you're looking is that Shane's resources are being slowly taken away from him. Sure, the Clear Smog is going to happen to the Iron Hands, but you could just go ahead and do that again, or you could just Drain Punch. Like really at the end of the day, you're in a lot of trouble here as Shane, because these two Pokemon are slowly getting chipped away at, either through stats, through their statuses, or just even like just the HP, right?
Yeah, and I did see Aaron double target this Tinglu here with Waterfall and Drain Punch. This might be a knockout the way this looks. Here it is, not enough.
Yeah, not like I think with should that Swords Dance Zeta would have definitely been enough here. And I think now if you're Aaron, you're sort of just realizing, oh, you know what, this Amoonguss isn't really that much of a problem. But if I get rid of this Tinglu, then I just have the game like locked and loaded up. So Iron Hands is gonna have to take down the Stomping Tantrum. Amoonguss is paralyzed on this turn. That would have been a great turn for it to be able to go for that Pollen Puff and maybe get back some of the HP that Tinglu had lost. But now you're just kind of in a spot where, yeah, Tinglu just gets knocked out. Sure, you could try to taunt, like, oh, you can't even like yeah, there's just like no.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, this game looks over, because the way that was going around, that team was gonna knock out the very next turn no matter what it tried to do. Even the leftovers recovery would not have been enough to save it from its eventual downfall.
Yeah, and just unfortunately, so that does mean that Aaron is going to go ahead and move on to the top 4 once again. So we will see, we'll see him in, well, I don't know who we're going to see in top 4, probably whoever else is in the other half of top 8. But hey, you know what? Congrats on both of them for making it to Top Cut for the last event of our local season, because it's always like a really great feeling. And so this is definitely one of those matches where if you are heading into NAIC, I think you definitely need to have a plan ready for that specific because it is the team that is running around the most right now. And if you don't have an answer for it, I think you're definitely going to be in a rough time for North America International Championship. So remember, Iron Hands, guys.
Yeah, make sure your Iron Hands is actually, make sure your team is able to at least try to stop Terrifier, Safety Goggles, Swords Dance, Iron Hands, because that's going to be the biggest problem right now based on what we're seeing in this PC. And if you don't have a clear answer to this, I mean, it doesn't matter if you have like Prankster Haze from something like a Murkrow. I mean, I probably wouldn't suggest it to you because of how frail it is.
But hey, as long as you have an answer, that's all that matters. And so we're just waiting for the last of our Type 8 matches to happen. So we'll see you all for top 4 in just a little bit, okay? Don't go anywhere.